The paper trembled in my hand before I read it twice. My name is Helen. I'm 58, married to David. Our son Mark is married to Claire. The bill felt slightly grainy at the edges, the kind of cheap hotel stock you can't mistake. I saw his name first, then hers. The same line, the same room, the same date range, like a dare. For a second, I tried to blame a clerical error. I wanted to. If I was wrong, I'd poison my own house. If I was right, my family would split down the middle. Sunday, our kitchen was set for lunch. Plates stacked, a clean mug waiting, the wedding band resting in its dish while I rinsed lettuce and tried to breathe evenly. David came in, saw the envelope on the counter, and smirked as if paperwork were an old joke between us. I had spent years trusting what he signed. One page made that history look naive. How do you argue with paper? The question wouldn't leave my mouth, so I said something smaller. Why is Claire's name next to yours? He didn't flinch. Some billing mix-up, he said, casual as weather. Don't make drama, Helen. Don't make drama! He tossed it into the air like a ball, as if the word could bounce and roll under the fridge and stay there. My chest tightened. I slid the bill back into the envelope and kept my voice steady. I'm calling the hotel. The hotel won't tell you anything. He reached for the envelope. I drew it away. What are you doing? I asked. Saving us both time. He walked out to the porch, whistling. The door shut with a dull thud. I stared at his empty coffee ring on the table and thought, this is the smallest stain and the biggest sign. I waited until the clock hit 9 and dialed the number at the top of the page. A woman answered with practiced calm. I told her I needed to confirm charges for a stay linked to our insurance. I gave David's name. I gave the date range. I kept my tone neutral, as if confirming the price of bread. She put me on hold. I counted each breath until she returned. Yes, ma'am, she said. 2 guests, 1 room. She read the name slowly, like she knew each syllable could cut. I asked for a copy for our records. She said she could email a receipt and leave a printout for pickup at the hospital billing office. I thanked her, hung up, and folded myself against the sink so I wouldn't fall. The stakes were simple now. If I spoke without proof, I could lose my son. If I stayed quiet with proof, I could lose myself. The door opened. David strolled back inside, lighter than before. You look pale, he said. Let's not mess up today. They'll be here soon. They? I repeated, as if the word were new to me. Mark and Claire, obviously. He leaned against the counter, too close, testing whether I'd move. I didn't. He reached toward the envelope. I put my hand over it. He laughed. It wasn't a warm sound. It had edges. I stepped back, folded the bill into my apron pocket, and let the pause stretch until it felt like its own room. 3 lines came fast, sharper than I planned. Whose idea was it? Be careful, Helen. Why her? He lifted his chin. You're embarrassing yourself. I inhaled, slow, then 2 words, quiet. Get out. He blinked. It's my house. Not today. For a moment, we were statues. Me by the sink, him by the counter, the space between us, tiled and clean, and refusing to choose a side. He pushed away first, scraped a chair with his foot, and headed for the hallway. I heard drawers open, then close. When he returned, his keys were gone from the bowl. I'll be back for lunch, he said, and smiled like a dare. Don't make a scene. He left. The quiet that followed wasn't peace. It was weight. I pressed my palm over the apron pocket to feel the crinkle, to prove that I wasn't imagining ink or names or the fact that a hotel isn't a clinic and a spouse isn't a coworker. Proof doesn't comfort you. It just keeps you from lying to yourself. I wiped the counter in slow circles. I told myself to keep every word small, to ration the truth until I could show it without shaking. I printed a to-do list on a scrap of paper. Pick up the printout, copy it, store it, breathe, act. Not much of a plan, but enough to stand on. Mark texted that they were running late. I stared at the screen and didn't answer. Claire sent a heart. I watched it stay there, unreturned. We had a family tradition of making room for each other on Sundays. I used to believe traditions were like guardrails, something that kept you from tumbling off the side. Maybe they're just paint. Maybe the road decides, not the stripe. When I finally sat, the envelope lay on my lap like a living thing. I slid the bill out again and read the names one more time. I read them as if misreading could save me. It couldn't. I tucked the paper back and pressed it flat with both hands. The decision felt small and enormous. I would not ask Claire. I would not tell Mark. Not yet. I would build a record before I built a confrontation. If it was a mistake, paper would admit it. If it wasn't, paper would guide me through what came next. Keys in the door again. David stepped inside, put his phone face down, and glanced at the table as if he'd left something there. "You still on that?" he asked. He didn't wait for my answer. He grinned and went down the hall, whistling the same tune as before. His laughter still echoes every time I open mail. She smiled at him the way I used to. The sound of glasses clinking and the low hum of laughter filled the restaurant that night. It was his 60th birthday, and the room was full of people who thought they knew what love looked like. Claire leaned close to him, whispering something that made his eyes crease with pleasure. Mark was refilling wine, oblivious, cheerful. Fasaka the table, I saw a private world between them that shouldn't exist. Later, someone sent me the photo album from the party. I sat alone at the kitchen table, scrolling. The flash caught her hand resting on his, hidden beneath the white tablecloth. 1 second, captured in light. I zoomed in until their fingers blurred together. I wanted to delete it, pretend I'd imagined it. But my hand refused to move. Instead, I printed it. The machine whirred, the paper warm when it slid out, the colors too bright, almost mocking. Julia dropped by that afternoon. I handed her the print. She squinted, lips pressed tight. "Maybe it's nothing," she said softly. "Maybe," I answered, "or maybe it's everything." "Don't accuse until you're sure," she warned. "Once it's said, you can't take it back." I nodded. She meant well, but she hadn't seen the way his thumb curved around Claire's wrist, casual and claiming. That detail wasn't an accident. When evening came, I set the table like always. 2 plates, 1 empty space where trust used to sit. The house smelled of garlic and butter, simple comfort. I left his portion on the stove, cooling. I didn't light the candles. The photo lay flat beside my water glass, the glossy surface catching the fading light. He came home later than usual. "You didn't wait up?" he asked, sounding amused, like we were still playing roles. "I wasn't hungry," I said. He loosened his tie, noticed the picture on the table. His eyes flicked to it, then to me. "What's this supposed to be?" "A question," I said. "Care to answer?" He picked it up, examined it with that detached smirk he wore when he thought I was being dramatic. "Someone caught us mid-laugh, that's all." "Under the table?" I asked quietly. "Don't twist things. You've always had an imagination." He tossed the photo back down, walked toward the hallway. I watched him from behind, the steady rhythm of his shoes against the floor. Each step sounded like distance. "You're really not going to eat?" he called over his shoulder. "No," I said. "I'm done serving lies." He stopped for a second, maybe surprised, then shrugged. "Suit yourself." The front door closed. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence he left behind. My chest burned, but my hands were steady. I took the picture, slid it into a drawer, then shut it carefully. That click felt like sealing something sacred. For years I'd made his dinners even when I wasn't hungry, smoothed every wrinkle in the day so he could rest easy. Now I let the food grow cold, untouched. It wasn't revenge. It was refusal. My silence would speak louder than any confrontation. He'd feel it first at the table, where love used to be routine. The next morning, sunlight poured through the kitchen window, harsh and too honest. He came down, checked the counter, saw no breakfast waiting. "You forget something?" he asked, half joking. "No," I said. "I remembered myself." He blinked, laughed softly, like it was nothing. But I saw the shift, the brief confusion, the hint of unease. The smallest crack can spread across a wall before anyone notices. I walked past him to the sink, rinsed my cup, and let the water run until it turned cold. Behind me, he opened a cupboard, looking for toast, muttering something about how people change. He wasn't wrong. Change had already started. I didn't look back. The line had been drawn quietly, between one meal and the next. The air felt lighter, sharper, like it belonged to me again. He noticed when his plate stayed empty. The spare key vanished the same day they did. The hook by the door was bare, and the little brass tag that used to swing on the end was gone. I stood there longer than made sense, staring at absence, telling myself there had to be a neat explanation. There wasn't. I opened the junk drawer, sifted through rubber bands and old batteries, as if a key might grow there by will alone. The house answered with a thin metallic jingle in my head, the kind you hear when memory rubs against doubt. I drove to the locksmith on Maple, the storefront squeezed between a tailor and a pawn shop. The counter smelled like dust and oil. The man behind it wore a heavy apron and a practical look. I set my old lock on the counter like a small confession. "Rekey or replace?" he asked. "Replace," I said. "Today." He eyed the deadbolt, then me. "You lose one, you change both. It's the only way you sleep." "I don't sleep much," I said. He nodded, and in that nod, I felt both permission and warning. He came out with a toolbox and followed me home in his van. I watched him work, precise and quiet, choosing new tumblers with the care of a surgeon. When he finished, he placed fresh keys in my palm, cool and heavy. "There you go," he said. "New start." I paid $240, kept the receipt, and tucked it into an envelope with the other papers I'd begun to gather. "If someone tries an old key," I asked, "what happens?" "They learn a lesson the easy way," he said. "They don't get in." That sounded good on the sidewalk. It sounded less certain in the hallway at dusk, when every shadow looked like a decision I hadn't made yet. I stood at the door and locked it, then unlocked it, then locked it again, training my hand to trust a new pattern. I set the spare on the top shelf of the pantry, far from habit. I told myself the stakes were simple. Safety first, explanations later. He came home late. The knob stopped in his hand. There was a beat of silence, then a rattle. Another beat. He lifted his fist and knocked once, almost playful. I waited, letting the seconds collect. "Open up," he called. I cracked the door on the chain. His expression swung from amused to irritated. "What's this about?" "Security," I said. "Keys changed." "Since when?" "Since today." "You're overreacting." "Maybe, but I'm done gambling." He leaned in. "Let me in." My fingers tightened on the chain. "Say why the spare is gone," I said, calm, not loud. His jaw worked. "You're not the only one who needs access. Claire is pregnant," he blurted, like the word could clear a path through the door. "We were dealing with things. You wouldn't understand." The hallway tilted. It wasn't fear that moved me. It was a cold rearranging of facts. "Whose child?" I asked, and the question hung there because some questions weigh more than an answer. He looked away first. "Don't do this on the doorstep." "Then don't make me." He tried to reach for the chain. I shut the door the last inch, breath steady, then opened it on the new lock and stepped back. He walked in, guarded, scanning the frame as if the wood had betrayed him. He tested the knob once. It held. "You made a mess," he said. "No, I cleaned up." He scoffed, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a brief respect for a boundary he hadn't set. He drifted through rooms like a tourist in a place he used to own. In the kitchen, he noticed the empty hook. "You hid it," he said. "I protected what's left," I answered. He rubbed his temples. "You're being dramatic." "I'm being careful." 3 short lines, and the space between them was a wall. "Give me a key." "Not yet." "You don't decide." I watched him measure the distance to the pantry, to the drawers, to the places I used to keep trust. He saw nothing to take. He grabbed his coat and moved toward the door with a shake of his head. At the bank the next morning, the branch manager listened while I explained, simple and clear. I showed the receipt from the locksmith, proof of a changed lock and a changed mind. She frowned, typed a note, and said she'd flag the account, her tone somewhere between support and procedure. I asked for temporary limits on withdrawals. She promised to look into it, which is what people say when they want to be helpful without being bold. I thanked her anyway. Paper beats talk, and I was building paper. On the way out, the security door made a soft, polite chime like a bell on a leash. I told myself the worst had been blocked. That night, I slid the chain into place, turned the bolt until it stopped, and set the new keys in a bowl I'd moved to the bedroom. I slept in pieces, waking to test the lock, then lying still until dawn. When the sun rose, the house felt almost mine again. Even so, when I walked into the hall, there he was at the kitchen table, already seated with a mug he hadn't poured. He still found his way inside somehow. My signature had already been used before I arrived. The teller at the branch kept glancing at me like I was the one who'd made the mess. The air smelled faintly of toner and coffee, a mix that reminded me of long, honest mornings when I still trusted everything we'd built. Now, every form in that room looked like a trap. She slid a sheet of paper across the desk. "You withdrew $12,000 last week," she said, pointing at the neat handwriting at the bottom. My name was there, curved, precise, but it wasn't mine. My chest tightened. The date matched the weekend they'd both been gone. I stared at the ink until it blurred. "That's not my signature," I said. Her polite smile didn't falter. "You'll need to fill out a dispute form. I want the account frozen. I'll have to check with my manager." "Check fast." She hesitated, turned, and disappeared behind frosted glass. I looked around the lobby at the posters promising safety, family, partnership, words that used to mean something. When she returned, she handed me a copy of the withdrawal slip. "You'll need to bring identification. We'll file a note for now." "I'm right here," I said, sliding my license across. "And I want that note written while I'm watching." She nodded and began typing. The sound of her keyboard felt slow, like time itself resisting the truth. When she printed the confirmation, I caught the scent of wet ink again. It hit me. Deceit really does have a smell. I folded the paper, pressed it into my purse, and knew this was no misunderstanding. It was a theft done with confidence. As I walked out, I caught a glimpse of the surveillance feed on a monitor behind the counter. 2 people, clear as daylight, him and Claire, entering the branch together. I froze. My husband's hand rested on her back, guiding her through the door. They looked comfortable, practiced. The image burned into me. Julia called that night. "You can't handle this alone," she said. "You have proof. Go to the police." "Not yet," I replied. "Not until I have more than paper." "You already have a signature that isn't yours." "And what will they do? Say it's a mistake? I need something they can't talk around." She sighed. "You're waiting for a perfect moment that won't come. Then I'll build it." The next morning, I wrote everything down, times, amounts, names, and took the bus downtown to the financial services office. The clerk behind the counter looked half asleep until I said the number. 12,000. That woke her up. She handed me a form and a pen, told me to fill in every line. I wrote slowly, carefully, making each letter sharp. When I was done, she stamped the corner with a red seal that bled slightly into the paper. The sound of it was sharp, final. "This makes it official," she said. Official. That word held me together as I walked out into the sunlight. My hands shook, but the envelope in my bag felt heavier than fear. It was proof. Thin, silent, but real. On the way home, I passed a store window displaying tiny baby clothes, blue and white, folded neatly. My throat closed. Mark and Claire were setting up a nursery, and I still couldn't tell him what his father had done. The thought tore through me. He didn't deserve this war between loyalty and truth. I kept walking. When I got home, I placed the envelope on the table. The seal left a faint red mark on the wood, like heat. I touched it once, careful not to smear it. Each dollar they'd taken was another wound, but also another reason not to rush. I would wait, collect, document. I would not let them say I imagined it. Proof would speak louder than guilt ever could. That night, I sat by the window, the city's hum rolling through the glass. The envelope glowed faintly under the lamp, the seal still fresh. I thought about how trust dies quietly, one document at a time. The stamped seal still burned through the envelope. Everyone heard us that night. The fight started in the kitchen, small words that grew too loud to fit between walls. I'd told myself I wouldn't shout again, but some truths refused to stay quiet. He stood near the counter, jaw set, pretending calm. "You think you can humiliate me?" he said. I answered before I could breathe. "You already did that yourself." The air felt heavy, and even the refrigerator hum sounded judgmental. A chair tipped when he moved toward me. I pushed it back upright. Steady hands, shaky breath. He followed me to the porch where the night air pressed close, sticky and cold. The porch light flickered above us, humming like it knew what was coming. "I gave you everything," he hissed. "You're tearing this family apart." "You gave her everything," I said, quiet, steady. "Not me." The neighbors across the street froze mid-step. Curtains shifted. Someone whispered. It was the kind of silence that listens hard, waiting for proof of what it suspects. He looked around, caught by the sudden audience. That made him angrier. "Go on then," he said, voice rising. "Tell them how crazy you are." "Stop pretending I don't exist," I snapped. "I know about the withdrawals, the hotel, the lies." "You don't know a damn thing." "Then prove it." The porch boards creaked between us. For a second I thought he might hit the railing instead of answering. But he didn't. He only spat out, "You're ruining everything," and turned toward the street. The argument wasn't quiet anymore. The neighborhood heard every word that mattered. Flashing blue lights washed over the driveway before I even realized someone had called. The patrol car idled, engine low and steady. 2 officers stepped out, their posture neutral, practiced. One of them asked if everything was all right. I opened my mouth, and the words came out raw. "Just an argument." My voice cracked on the second word. He asked if there'd been violence. I shook my head. "Only words," I said. "Sharp ones." They took statements separately. He talked first, calm and polite, weaving a version of events I didn't recognize. I watched his back straighten as he lied smoothly about misunderstandings and exaggerations. When it was my turn, I told them the truth. No hitting, no threat, just betrayal heavy enough to drag us outside. The younger officer scribbled something in his pad, eyes kind but distant. "You'll both cool down," he said. "We just need to file the visit." That phrase, "file the visit," sounded sterile, almost hopeful, as if paper could hold what words couldn't. The flashing lights dimmed when they left. I stood alone, the porch light buzzing overhead, its weak glow stretching across the cracked step. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was residue, proof that something ugly had finally been seen. He came back inside later, quieter, a different kind of dangerous. "You made us a spectacle," he said. "You did that yourself." His eyes flickered, calculating. "They'll forget by morning." "They won't," I said. "Not this time." He slammed a door, and the sound echoed through every room. I stood in the hallway, heart pounding, and realized I didn't need his version of truth anymore. There was an official report now, a patrol log that said we existed, that what happened wasn't just in my head. Power, I learned, doesn't come from silence. It comes from being recorded. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A message from Claire. "You should be ashamed." No greeting, no question mark, just accusation. I stared at it, thumb hovering. Instead of replying, I saved the message. The words were ugly, but they were evidence, another thread in the tapestry of deceit. Outside, neighbors pretended to water plants or check mail, their eyes flicking toward my porch and away again. I didn't mind. Let them talk, let them remember. Every whisper meant one more witness who knew I wasn't the only guilty one. The porch light still hummed faintly above me, a reminder that night doesn't erase sound. It only hides it for a while. The neighbors still talk about that night. He told me betrayal doesn't always break the law. The words dropped like stones, each one hitting a part of me I'd hoped was still protected. The office smelled faintly of old coffee and furniture polish, that blend of time and wear that settles into places where people come to fix what's already broken. He wrote figures on a yellow pad, $58,000 in savings, $12,000 gone, and said, "Theft's only theft if you can prove intent." His paperweight caught the light, a heavy glass sphere pressing down on a stack of files. "This is your husband," he continued, voice steady. "And this other person, Claire, is connected by marriage, not contract. It muddies things." I stared at the numbers. 2 lines that now represented years of work, trust, routine. "They took it together," I said. "I have statements, signatures. Her name shouldn't even be there." He nodded slowly, folding his hands. "Then we start with documentation. Bank records, bills, texts if you have them. But understand something, Mrs. He stopped himself, searching for a softer tone. "Understand something. Immorality doesn't equal illegality. What he's done is wrong, but courts need proof of intent, not heartbreak." The ticking of a wall clock filled the pause. I studied the second-hand move, each click a reminder of what patience would now cost. "So what do?" I asked. "Retain counsel. Send a formal letter demanding clarity on funds. If he refuses, we escalate." "Escalate," I repeated, the word tasting clinical, distant. "That means court?" "Eventually, but start with pressure. Sometimes pressure is enough." He slid the paper across the desk for me to sign. My hand hesitated. "What if it isn't?" "Then we make it legal," he said, "and expensive." The paperweight gleamed again as he pressed it gently to the form I'd signed, flattening it smooth. I took that as a sign. My pain, now neatly pressed into process. When I left, the city air felt colder than it should have. The sound of traffic outside was steady, like background noise to a decision I couldn't take back. That night, Julia poured tea and listened while I recited every detail. "So now you're paying someone to tell you you're right?" she asked, half joking. But the edge in her tone wasn't lost on me. "I'm paying him to make it official." "Even if it won't change him?" "I'm not doing it to change him," I said. "I'm doing it to protect what's mine." She looked unconvinced. "I just don't want you to lose more than money in this." I wanted to tell her it was already too late for that, but I bit it back. The taste of tea had gone bitter. I went to bed early, hoping for stillness. But sleep didn't come. The ceiling fan whirred above, each rotation marking another thought I couldn't turn off. "Betrayal doesn't always break the law," he'd said. "Maybe not, but it still breaks people." Morning brought a new sound, the soft scrape of paper against tile. I opened the door to find a brown envelope half under the threshold, my name written in careful script. Inside was a notice from his attorney, request for mediation, response required within 10 days. No greeting, no apology, just procedure. My hands trembled as I read it. He'd moved faster than I expected, already turning guilt into strategy. I took the envelope to the lawyer's office the same afternoon. He read it quietly, lips pressed tight. "He's playing offense," he said. "You did the right thing calling me." "So what happens now?" "Now we wait. Patience is your weapon. Every move he makes, we record it." Waiting. It sounded small, but it felt enormous. I walked home with the envelope folded neatly in my bag, its edge digging against my side like a reminder. On the bus, 2 strangers argued about something trivial. Change, a seat, the last stop, and I envied them. Their anger would vanish by the time they got home. Mine had turned permanent. Back in the apartment, I placed the envelope under a glass dish on the counter, as if anchoring it there could stop the next storm from arriving. The sun dipped low, the light through the blinds cutting the room into stripes. I traced one with my finger and thought about the lawyer's desk, his calm tone, the weight of that glass paperweight pinning down what was left of my certainty. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that doesn't soothe but waits. I made another cup of tea, the water turning cloudy as it met the leaves. Julia was right about one thing. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about not disappearing under the weight of someone else's choices. I stood at the sink, watching the cup fill, and decided I'd keep every document, every receipt, every word. Because in the end, truth may take time, but it keeps its own record. The envelope under the door wasn't the last. The math told the story they wouldn't. I'd always thought numbers were neutral, simple truth on paper. But that morning, as the accountant laid out the spreadsheet, I realized even math could sound like betrayal. The click of his calculator echoed through his small office, each press another crack in the ground beneath me. "There's a pattern here," he said, sliding the document forward. 4 lines highlighted in yellow. "See these? Same account, same transfer origin, different memos. $20,800. Hotel booking, March 3rd. $2,400. Consulting, April 11th. $3,600. Gift, May 7th. $1,200. ATM, June 10th. He tapped the last line with his pen. "That's your missing $10,000. No random withdrawals. Same account trail, personal to joint to vendor. You were right." I leaned closer, eyes tracing the dates. The digits blurred slightly, but the weight behind them didn't. "He used the joint funds for her," I said quietly. "Every month, like clockwork." The accountant nodded, careful not to sound sympathetic. "I'll prepare a report you can submit with your filing. But remember, proof of spending isn't proof of intent. They'll fight context." "Let them," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "This isn't about guilt anymore. It's about exposure." He pushed a folder toward me. Inside, clean pages, columns of figures, and at the bottom, his signature, small but official. I slipped the folder into my bag and felt a strange calm settle in. Numbers couldn't lie, even if people did. On the drive home, the street lamps flickered against the windshield, rhythmic and cold. The accountant's words replayed in my head. "They'll fight context." Context in our marriage had always meant excuses. He'd called me paranoid, dramatic, unwell. Now the proof was lined up neatly on a spreadsheet, every dollar shouting louder than I ever could. When I walked through the door, he was waiting at the dining table, sleeves rolled up, pretending to sort mail. "You've been busy," he said. "I have." "You should have told me you were seeing someone." "I did. A professional," I said. "An accountant." That made him look up. The quiet between us turned sharp. "You went digging through my finances?" "Our finances," I corrected. He laughed, a short, forced sound. "You think you've got something, don't you?" "I have more than something," I said. "I have dates, amounts, transfers. The math doesn't lie." He stood, jaw tightening. "You can't prove love's a crime." "Love?" I asked. "Is that what hotel bookings are now?" The question hung there, fragile and poisonous. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was the cleanest confession I'd ever heard. I reached into my bag and placed the folder on the table. The papers made a soft thud, deliberate and final. "These go to court tomorrow. If you have anything left to say, now's the time." He didn't move, just stared at the folder like it was a weapon. "You won't win," he muttered. "I don't have to," I said. "I just have to tell the truth." He looked smaller in that moment, the confidence leaking out of him like air from a punctured tire. For the first time, I saw something unfamiliar in his eyes. Not rage, not arrogance, but calculation failing to find its footing. Fear. My phone buzzed. A message from my ally. "Injunction paperwork ready. Bring documentation before 4. I texted back one word. "Done." When I turned, He was still watching me. "You're making a mistake," he said. "Maybe, but it's mine to make." He exhaled hard, the sound somewhere between defeat and disbelief. "You won't come back from this." "I don't want to," I said. I walked out before he could reply. In the car, I glanced at the folder on the passenger seat. The papers inside were just lines and numbers, but they had stripped away every lie he'd built. The street outside shimmered under the lamp glow, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel small. At the courthouse, I signed the petition. The clerk asked if I wanted to attach supporting documentation. I nodded and slid the folder across the counter. The seal pressed down with a dull sound that felt heavier than any gavel. As I stepped back outside, I realized my hands weren't shaking anymore. The air was cold, the kind that wakes you up instead of punishing you. When I got home, his car was gone, the porch light still on. I didn't turn it off. Let it shine on the empty driveway. Let the neighbors see. He finally looked afraid of me. They painted me as unstable. The clinic called in the afternoon, voice neutral, asking me to come in for a quick check. I almost said no. Then I thought of the photo, the bill, the ledger, and said yes. The waiting room looked harmless. Plants, calm posters, soft chairs arranged to pretend nothing serious happens there. When the receptionist slid a clipboard across, I felt my hands steady instead of shake. There were boxes for symptoms I didn't have and causes I didn't agree with. The hallway opened to a small exam room. The first thing I noticed was the sharp disinfectant in the air, the kind that clings even after you leave. I sat on the papered table and stared at the sink, counting the breaths it took for the door to open. My doctor came in, kind eyes, careful voice. He closed the chart and spoke gently. "I received a request from your husband," he said. "He's worried. He asked for an evaluation." "He asked," I repeated. "He framed it as concern." "Did he mention the withdrawals?" "No." "The hotel?" He paused. "No." I let the silence sit between us. He reached into the folder and pulled out a single-page referral. This is what he submitted. It suggests stress, sleep disruption, possible paranoia. He met my eyes. "I don't see that in you today." "Because it isn't there." "I believe you," he said. And I held on to those words even as I watched his face change with the next sentence. "But I have to document that a family member requested screening." "He's not protecting me," I said. "He's protecting himself." "I understand," he answered softly. "I also have to follow procedure." "Then note my statement," I said, "and attach a copy of the referral to my record. I want a copy to take with me." He nodded, wrote slowly, every pen stroke methodical. I watched his careful handwriting like it might betray me if I looked away. When he was done, he slid the paper across. I read the lines. The language was mild, almost sweet. The effect was not. A polite letter can still bruise. He said, "You could consider counseling." "I will consider legal counsel," I said. "Different kind." His mouth tightened, not unkindly. "If this escalates, the notes will matter." "That is why I'm here." On my way out, I stopped at the nurse's station. "Please date stamp the copy," I said, "and sign that I received it." The nurse flicked her eyes toward the closed door, then back to me, and signed. Small kindness, small courage. Outside, the sky looked ordinary. People carried bags, checked phones, hurried past. The ordinary still existed. It just wasn't for me yet. I walked to the precinct because I refused to go home and stare at couch cushions while doubt multiplied. At the front desk, a calm officer listened while I explained the referral and the pattern. "I want this on record," I said. "I'm being pushed into a box I don't belong in." He typed, careful and slow. "We can log the concern and your statement. It creates a trail. If there's harassment, documented contact, we can advise next steps." "I'm asking you to write that today," I said. "I want a copy." "You'll get one." When he handed me the printout, I slid it into my bag beside the clinic letter. 2 pages, nothing flashy. Still, they felt like armor. The stakes were simple and brutal. If I let them define me, I would vanish. If I defined myself, I might pay for it in other ways. I preferred the second cost. That evening, my phone buzzed without rest. Friends of friends sent kind little messages about taking breaks, getting rest, trying yoga. Claire posted about elder confusion with a smiley face that made people call me brave while treating me like a ghost. I put the phone face down and turned it off. The apartment held its breath. Later, Julia came by with soup I didn't want. "Maybe take a day," she said. "This is a lot." "It is," I answered. "But I won't hide." She hugged me at the door, longer than usual. "I worry." "I know." After she left, I laid the letters on the table and lined up the edges. I had exactly what I needed for the next step: a referral written without my consent and a report filed on my terms. Tomorrow, I would bring both to the lawyer. I set an alarm for 2 and another for 15 minutes after, just in case. I didn't plan to oversleep. I planned not to miss anything. Even the doctor started doubting me. The courtroom smelled like bleach and fear. Rows of benches, polished but worn, reflected the harsh overhead lights. I stood at the front, papers trembling slightly, though I told myself it was the air conditioning. My husband sat beside his lawyer, half turned toward me with that practiced smirk. Behind him, Claire crossed her legs like she owned the room. I had imagined this day 100 ways. None of them felt this real. The clerk called the case. My lawyer whispered, "Stay calm. Let the record speak." I nodded, though the record was now my life condensed to pages and signatures. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The shuffle of shoes, the scrape of chairs, it sounded like ceremony and punishment in equal measure. He looked at me first. "You're requesting a protective order restricting joint account access?" His tone was clipped, procedural. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "He's made unauthorized withdrawals and attempted to reopen closed access without consent." The lawyer for the other side rose immediately. "My client disputes that characterization. The accounts were marital, and she's misinterpreting the transactions." "She has evidence," my lawyer countered. "Bank statements, forensic analysis, and a notarized affidavit from the branch manager." The judge gestured. "Proceed." I held the stack of papers tighter, fingertips brushing the embossed seal. The light from above glared against it, sharp and unforgiving. My voice steadied as I read from my prepared statement. "For 30 years, we built that account together. But in the last year, he's used it to hide transactions, transfer funds, and manipulate my access. When I revoked consent, he violated it again. This isn't a dispute, it's a breach." The courtroom stayed silent, except for the faint hum of the lights. My husband leaned to whisper something to his lawyer. The judge noticed. "Mr. Davis," he said, "you'll have your turn." The smirk faded, just a fraction. The clerk stepped forward with the summary sheet from the ledger review. "Documented transfers totaling $10,000, directed to private bookings and gifts, corroborated by receipt entries." The words rolled through the air like slow thunder. Somewhere in the back, someone murmured, "That's a lot." I caught Claire's reflection in the glass panel. Her face was pale, her hand tight around her phone. I almost pitied her. Almost. The judge signed the temporary order after a pause that felt longer than it was. "Effective immediately. 90 days. No contact, no withdrawals, pending further review." He stamped it once, the sound loud enough to make me flinch. My husband started to speak, but his lawyer gripped his arm. "Don't!" she hissed. The judge looked at me again. "You'll receive formal notice by mail. Stay reachable through counsel." "Yes, Your Honor." The moment felt weightless, almost dreamlike. Years of fear, doubt, second-guessing, all distilled into one stamped piece of paper. The raised edges of the seal pressed into my palm, warm now from my grip. For once, it felt like armor instead of bureaucracy. When court adjourned, the crowd began to buzz. Reporters near the back whispered, flipping notebooks. I walked out without answering a single question. My lawyer stayed behind to collect copies. Outside, the daylight hit me hard, like I'd forgotten how to stand in it. At the courthouse steps, I caught sight of them again, he and Claire, huddled together near the columns. She touched his arm like she was the victim now. He turned away when he saw me watching. That, more than the order itself, told me he finally understood something had shifted. My phone vibrated in my bag, messages piling up. Julia's voice note, a missed call from the bank's legal department, a new email from the branch confirming the freeze. I didn't open any of them. I just stood still and breathed. For the first time in months, it felt even. My heart didn't race. My thoughts didn't spiral. Balance. Small, fragile, real. But calm doesn't last when truth threatens power. As I reached my car, I saw a shadow moving by the gate, a figure holding up a phone, recording. Claire's voice carried across the lot, soft but sharp enough to pierce. "Enjoy your victory. It won't last." I got in, shut the door, and turned the key. The gavel's sound still echoed in my mind, steady as a clock. The order was real, official, sealed in light and ink. Yet under it all, I felt the next wave forming, silent but sure. But Claire wasn't finished with me yet. They accused me of fraud in return. The words sounded absurd, even as the clerk read them aloud in that flat, public tone that stripped everything of dignity. "Counterclaim," she said, like it was just another filing in a day of dozens. My lawyer leaned closer and whispered, "They're playing defense by offense. Stay composed." Easy for him to say. My name was now attached to a word I'd never imagined beside it: fraud. The courtroom was fuller this time. I felt the eyes, the murmur, the quiet tilt of heads that follows scandal. Across the aisle, Claire adjusted her blazer, all polished calm, while my husband leaned back with arms crossed. His lawyer spoke first, loud enough for the back row to hear. "Our client asserts that Mrs. Davis misrepresented joint funds and made false accusations intended to damage reputations." I could almost hear the collective breath of the audience. Lies sound more convincing when spoken with confidence. When my lawyer stood, his voice cut through the room. "We will show, Your Honor, that every action taken by my client was by policy, verified by the institution's own representative." He gestured toward the witness stand, and the bank manager approached, steady, composed. The judge nodded. "Proceed." The manager took the oath and adjusted his glasses. "I personally reviewed the account restrictions requested by Mrs. Davis. All were legitimate and followed federal and internal compliance standards." The opposing lawyer interrupted. "So she didn't block her husband's lawful access?" "She limited it," the manager said, "as is her right under joint account policy when misuse is suspected." "She suspected misuse because of her personal feelings, not proof," the other lawyer countered. "No," the manager said, voice firm now. "Because of the audit trail. The pattern matched unauthorized transfers. I'd sign my name to that again." That line silenced the room. Even the judge looked up briefly. I caught Claire's eyes then, darting, uncertain. For once, she didn't have the upper hand. My lawyer handed the judge a folder. The texture of it was rough against my palm earlier when I'd passed it to him. Proof of the truth, bound and solid. Inside were the statements, the correspondence, the certified complaint I'd filed months ago. It was all real, every page a refutation of their lies. The judge flipped through the papers slowly. "I'll need both parties to submit written summaries within 10 days, he said. "The hearing will resume thereafter." The opposing side nodded as if they'd planned it. Their lawyer smiled thinly. "We'll comply, Your Honor." 10 days, my lawyer repeated, writing it down. The scratch of his pen on paper grounded me. 10 days to hold on, 10 days to gather everything, 10 days to prove I wasn't the unstable woman they wanted me to be. As court adjourned, people rose, a rustle of movement and whispers. Reporters had already gathered by the door. Cameras flashed the moment I stepped into the hallway, the light striking my face so hard I had to blink. One shouted a question about the fraud allegation. Another asked if I regretted filing the original claim. I said nothing. I just tightened my grip on my bag and kept walking. Outside, the air was sharp. My lawyer caught up, handing me the court notice. Hearing continuation. County Clerk's Office. Date fixed for the 10th. I stared at the seal pressed into the paper. 10 days. It wasn't much, but it was structure. And structure meant survival. He spoke softly. You did well in there. The witness helped. They looked rattled. Not rattled enough, I said. They'll come harder next time. They will, he agreed. But they're fighting from fear now, not strength. I believed him, but belief didn't quiet the dread. That night, at home, I placed the official notice on the kitchen table beside the same mug I'd once set for him, the same spot where this had all started. The stain from his old coffee cup was still faintly visible on the wood, a ring that refused to fade no matter how many times I scrubbed. I traced it once, then folded the paper neatly over it, as if sealing away a ghost. 10 days. The clock on the wall ticked steady, each sound reminding me that the truth had its own rhythm, slow but certain. I would meet every deadline, answer every lie, and walk back into that room ready. 10 days to prove I wasn't crazy. Everyone was there to see who would fall. The courthouse lobby buzzed long before the doors opened. I caught glimpses of familiar faces, neighbors, co-workers, even the grocery clerk who used to hand me receipts with quiet sympathy. Today, none of them looked away. They wanted to witness the ending. Inside, the benches filled quickly. The air felt thick, every cough magnified. I sat behind my lawyer, hands clasped around the folder containing every page that had nearly cost me my sanity. Across the aisle, my husband stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Claire sat 2 seats behind him, her eyes hidden under heavy bangs. The judge entered and the room shifted to silence. The sound of the gavel hitting wood cut through everything. Court is now in session. He began reading slowly, line by line, each word deliberate. After reviewing the financial audit, submitted testimonies, and evidence of unauthorized transfers totaling $10,000, this court finds sufficient proof of embezzlement and moral breach of fiduciary duty. My lawyer whispered, "That's it. That's the key phrase." I nodded, but I barely heard him. The words struck like something both final and freeing. The judge continued, "Restitution to be paid in full to the petitioner. Access to all joint assets remains restricted pending confirmation of compliance." No one clapped, but the sound of whispered reaction filled the space, like wind moving through a crowd before a storm breaks. I caught fragments. She was right all along. Did you see his face? Took her months, but she did it. Claire shifted in her seat, her hands fidgeting in her lap. When I looked at her, she looked away. My husband didn't. He just stared down at the table, motionless. Maybe shame, maybe calculation. It didn't matter anymore. The judge signed the last page, his gavel striking once more. The sound carried through me like a closing door. When court adjourned, people stood but didn't rush to leave. It was like no one wanted to break the spell. The bailiff opened the exit, and light from the corridor cut through the dim room, catching the dust in the air. My lawyer gathered the papers and handed me the final document, the judgment itself, stamped and sealed. I ran my thumb along the raised emblem, feeling its edges press into my skin. Outside, the crowd spilled onto the courthouse steps. Reporters called my name. "Mrs. Davis, how do you feel? Do you think he'll appeal?" I didn't answer. I didn't owe them a quote. The decision was already public. I didn't need to explain survival to strangers. A few women from the neighborhood stopped near the railing. One smiled faintly. "You did it right," she said, almost in a whisper. I managed a nod. The air smelled like rain about to start. The clouds hung heavy, then split just enough for sunlight to push through. It wasn't bright, not yet, but it was enough to cast a faint glow over the courthouse windows. I stood still, watching the people disperse, the cameras lower, the whispers fade. For months, I'd lived inside documents and hearings, gasps and denials. Now, the paperwork felt lighter in my hands, proof of what had been done to me and what I had done back. My lawyer touched my shoulder. "It's over," he said softly. On paper, I replied. He didn't argue. He knew better. Justice may close a file, but it doesn't close a wound. I walked down the courthouse steps, each one slow and deliberate. The folded letter from the judgment pressed against my palm, grounding me. I had fought their story and replaced it with truth. Yet beneath the relief was something quieter, something restless. Because even after victory, the echoes don't stop. They linger in memory, in routine, in the way people look at you differently afterward. I could already feel it, the strange distance between being vindicated and being free. But peace didn't come overnight. The silence felt heavier than their betrayal. When I unlocked the door, the air didn't move. It was as if the house itself had stopped breathing. I stepped inside, and every sound, my keys, my shoes on the floorboards, felt like an intrusion. The curtains hung half open, dust floating in narrow shafts of dull light. They had moved out without notice. The property office called that morning to confirm it. The place looks emptied, the clerk said gently. I didn't know how to prepare for what emptied really meant. The inspector met me there, clipboard in hand, his voice measured and professional. Scratches on 3 doors, he said. Missing furniture, minor damage to fixtures. He read from his notes as though narrating a stranger's home. The total was $3,200 in losses. I nodded, signing where he pointed, though the real loss wasn't on any form. When he left, I walked through each room. The dining table was gone. The rug that once covered the living room floor had left a pale square of clean wood behind, like a ghost of what used to be. I brushed my hand along the wall, and a thin layer of dust clung to my fingertips. It was soft, dry, untouched, proof of absence. The hallway smelled faintly of varnish and time. I paused near the doorframe, tracing the small dents where pictures once hung. There had been a photograph there, our anniversary dinner, smiling because we thought the camera could erase what was already cracking beneath the surface. Julia arrived later, with boxes and tape. You shouldn't do this alone, she said. I already did the hard part, I replied. This is just cleaning up the proof. We worked quietly, boxing the last traces of their stay. I found one of Claire's scarves in the closet, still folded neatly. I placed it in the discard pile without unfolding it. Julia labeled each box in careful, shaky handwriting. Linens, kitchen, documents. When she finished, she leaned against the counter, eyes tired but kind. You'll feel better when it's all gone, she said. I didn't answer right away. My hand rested on the mantel where the wedding photo still stood, framed in silver. The glass was cracked from one corner to the next, a fracture like lightning across 2 smiling faces. I turned it over, pressing it flat against the wood. For a long moment, I just stood there, listening to the quiet. The house wasn't angry anymore. It was empty, yes, but it was mine again. As we closed the last box, Julia asked softly, Do you think you'll stay here? I don't know, I said, but I'm not leaving in the middle of someone else's story. Outside, dusk settled slowly. The windows reflected faint traces of color, the kind that doesn't last but still insists on being seen. I walked to the doorway, hand brushing the frame one last time. No sounds, no movement, only stillness waiting to be filled. When Julia left, I locked the door and turned off the lights. For the first time in years, the house wasn't keeping secrets. I slept through the night for the first time. He deserved the truth, even if it broke him. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he used to do homework as a boy, now cluttered with drafts and empty envelopes. The clock ticked quietly in the next room. I hadn't written a letter in years, not one that mattered. But this one had to hold everything. The facts, the betrayal, the years I'd kept my silence thinking I was protecting him. The pen slipped once, leaving a faint smear of ink near the top of the page. I left it there. It felt honest. The scent of paper and ink filled the air, sharp and comforting. I wrote his name first, then the words I had practiced in my head every night since the trial ended. I need to tell you what really happened, I began. I told him everything. About the hotel bill on March 3rd, the forged withdrawal slip, the $12,000 that disappeared before I even knew they'd touched the account. I described the courtroom, the faces that refused to meet mine, the moment the seal pressed against the verdict sheet. Each sentence was a confession, but not for guilt, for release. I didn't soften it. He deserved the full truth, even the parts that made me look small or weak. I wrote how I'd kept silent when the rumors spread, how I'd let people believe I was the unstable one. I told him that silence doesn't always mean peace. It can also mean survival. By the 5th page, my hand ached. I paused, looking out the window where the mailbox stood at the end of the driveway, the red flag tilted up from the morning delivery. The sky was pale, the air heavy with quiet. I kept writing. On page 7, I told him what I'd never said aloud, that none of it was his fault. "You were a child watching adults collapse," I wrote. "That wasn't your burden to carry." By the 10th page, the words felt lighter. I signed my name and sealed the envelope, pressing the flap down with my thumb. For a moment, I held it close, as if warmth could change what it contained. Then I stood, walked to the door, and stepped outside. The wind carried a faint chill. My hand trembled as I opened the mailbox. I placed the letter inside and let the red flag drop. It clicked shut, final and steady. The sound echoed in my chest. 2 days passed before the phone rang. "Mom?" His voice cracked. I could hear the pause, the effort it took him to continue. I read it. I swallowed hard. "I wasn't sure you'd want to." "I did," he said quietly. "And I believe you." Those 4 words undid months of doubt. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was explaining myself to the world. I was being heard by the only person who mattered. He promised to visit soon, to start again. I told him I'd make coffee and try not to cry. He laughed softly. It was the same laugh he had as a boy, when forgiveness was simple and love was assumed. After the call ended, I sat in the same chair, staring at the empty spot where the letter had been. The air felt clearer. The weight on my chest shifted. The truth had finally traveled the distance I couldn't cross in person. Forgiveness came wrapped in his silence. The same sun that once exposed lies now felt kind. Morning stretched gently across the kitchen, soft and pale, touching the rim of my coffee mug. I watched the steam rise and fade, tracing its quiet path before disappearing. The air felt different, clean, calm, almost forgiving. For the first time in years, the light didn't reveal what was broken. It revealed what had survived. Months had passed since the verdict, since the letter, since the silence between Mark and me had turned into understanding. The house no longer echoed emptiness. It breathed again, slowly but steadily. On the counter lay a thin envelope, already opened, its words simple and direct. "We are pleased to welcome you as a volunteer for our senior outreach program." I read it twice. The acceptance wasn't grand, but it meant something steady. It meant I still had purpose beyond what they took from me. At the bottom of the letter was a time and place. Wednesday, 9 a.m., Community Center. I smiled at the thought of walking into a room full of women, some with stories heavier than mine, some just beginning theirs. I would listen, maybe guide, maybe just sit with them through the quiet parts no one talks about. Outside, the garden had grown wild, but one rose still bloomed near the fence, stubborn and bright. I carried my mug outside and leaned on the railing, breathing in the faint sweetness that floated through the air. The sun caught the petals just right, showing their veins like scars that hadn't ruined them. Julia called earlier that week. "You sound lighter," she said. "I am," I told her. "Not fixed, just lighter." She laughed softly. "That's enough." It was. I went back inside and folded the letter neatly, sliding it into the drawer where old bills used to sit. In its place on the counter, beside my mug, was my wedding band. A dull circle of memory. I hadn't worn it since the court day. For months, it had lived at the back of a drawer, forgotten under paperwork. But this morning, I wanted to see it one last time. I picked it up and held it to the light. The surface had lost its shine. I thought of what it once meant: security, belonging, the promise of forever. Then I thought of what it became: a symbol of silence, of pretending. It didn't hurt anymore, not the way it used to. It was just a ring. I set it down beside the letter, their edges almost touching. The past and the future, side by side. The kettle clicked, the sound small and domestic. I poured another cup and sat by the window, watching the light move slowly across the floor. Every day before, I had dreaded mornings. They used to feel like exposure, like another round of proving I was still standing. Now they felt like permission, to begin again, to live without apology. Mark had called last night. "I booked my flight," he said. "Next month. I want to see you." I smiled at the thought. "I'll be here," I said. "Take your time." We didn't say much more. We didn't need to. Forgiveness doesn't need many words. It needs space and time and quiet mornings like this one. The letter still lay open on the counter. I looked at it again, at the printed signature from someone I'd never met, offering me a place to start anew. I whispered the words under my breath, as if sealing something unseen between us. The sunlight shifted, spilling gently across the floorboards, climbing the walls, filling corners that once held shadows. I ran my hand across the counter, feeling the warmth that lingered. I choose myself now. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks, so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moments stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story. With respect and gratitude,